The twin brothers had always been a package deal. For 27 years, they shared everything: a tiny apartment, ramen dinners, and one impossible dream: to own something, anything, that was truly theirs. That dream, apparently, looked like a derelict shack. The fisherman's hut, the realtor called it. They called it a wooden box one strong gust away from becoming driftwood. They pooled every last dollar, every minimum wage shift, every bit of savings they had. The final price? $70,000. For this ruin. They were either geniuses or complete fools. The place was a mess. Leaky roof, no insulation, and the floor was the worst part, constantly damp. They signed the papers anyway. Their plan was simple: fix the basic structure, rent it out to local surfers or fishermen, and maybe double their money in 5 years. The first week was all demolition. They ripped out the kitchen, the bathroom, and even found a family of raccoons living in the attic. Standard abandoned house stuff. But the floor was different. It wasn't just damp from the humidity. They assumed it was a drainage issue or that the foundations were sunk. They decided to pull up the floorboards in the main room. It was nasty work. The air was thick with mold and sea salt. But as they got deeper, they started noticing something strange about the supporting joists. Most old huts are just built on pilings or packed dirt. But this one had a crude concrete slab under a central section. It was rough, clearly hand-poured, and it stopped right where the main room was supposed to be. It was entirely out of place for a cheap, 60-year-old fisherman's shack. They tried to dismiss it. Maybe the previous owner just poured a patch for a stove or something heavy. But their gut was screaming. You don't put that much effort into a subfloor of a disposable building. They grabbed the sledgehammer. It was time to find out what was really underneath. That concrete was harder than anything they'd ever seen. It took them nearly 2 hours just to crack a small section. But when it finally broke, the sound wasn't the clang of dirt or the splash of water. It was a hollow, resonant echo. Like a drum. That hollow sound was the first time they realized this wasn't just a fixer-upper. This was a mystery. Hey guys! Quick break, because we need your help to show you the full story of this hut. We are so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and we need to smash that goal ASAP. If you haven't already, please hit that like button and subscribe. It makes a massive difference. Also, drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching this video from. We love seeing how far our adventures travel. Now, let's get back to the good stuff. They used chisels to carefully remove the remaining concrete pieces. The opening was about 3 feet by 3 feet, big enough for one of them to squeeze through. The air that came up was cold, dry, and surprisingly, smelled faintly metallic. They grabbed a flashlight. That's when they saw it. Not dirt. Not water. Stairs. Stone stairs, leading down into absolute blackness. They were expertly crafted, not crude. This was a vault, not a simple basement. This hut, this shack that cost them their life savings, was just a flimsy lid on top of something ancient and deliberately hidden. They looked at each other, not knowing if they were about to find buried treasure or a cold, concrete grave. The decision was easy, but terrifying. They had to go down. They secured a rope around a main support beam, and the lighter twin volunteered to go first. The silence was the worst part. You could hear the wind outside, but down there, it was completely dead. The brother kept shining his light, counting the steps. 20 steps. Then the light beam opened up into a vast, cold space. He hit the bottom and his jaw just dropped. This wasn't a hole. It was a room. A perfect, dry, climate-controlled chamber carved out of the bedrock. It smelled of old wood and iron. The first thing he saw was the chests. 2 of them. Massive, heavy, sitting right there. The other twin heard the muffled yell of pure disbelief from below. He lowered the second flashlight and followed him down. Standing there, 50 feet under the hut, felt like stepping into a time capsule. The room was strange. No cobwebs, no mold. It was almost like someone had just left. The stone walls had carvings, not decorative, but functional, like markers or warnings. They almost missed the table, fixated on the chests. But the journal, that's where the real story began. It was a ship's log, dated from the early 1940s. It was the handwriting of a man named Elias Thorne. Elias Thorne was a known local legend, a fisherman who suddenly vanished in the war era, rumored to have been smuggling gold or spying. His hut was where their hut now stood. The log detailed his last journey, a secret naval operation off the coast of New England, not fishing. The last entry was the key. It read, "The cargo is secured. The drop-off was betrayed. I have taken the payload and buried the heart of the operation beneath my home. May it never fall into the wrong hands. It is protected by the rock, and the cost of discovery will be steep." He had been entrusted with something vital, something the enemy was trying to acquire. The journal didn't say what the cargo was, only that it was protected by the rock, and the cost of discovery will be steep. That part chilled them. They had to choose. The small wooden chest or the massive iron safe. They figured the safe held the main secret, but the padlock on the wooden box looked frail. They used a heavy-duty bolt cutter on the padlock. It snapped. The wooden chest was filled to the brim with documents, maps, naval codes, and old military identification tags. This was proof. Elias Thorne was a secret operative, not just a fisherman. But still no millions. They started to feel deflated. This was incredible history, but it wasn't the millions they were hoping for. They had risked everything, only to find old paper. They took a deep breath. There was still the safe. This thing weighed a ton. It was bolted directly into the stone foundation. They knew they couldn't open it without serious power tools and risking the entire structure collapsing on them. They had to go back to the hut, regroup, and figure out how to crack the final vault. They spent the entire night hauling the equipment. This was a Hail Mary. If they failed to open the safe, all this risk and money would have been for nothing. The plan was simple. Cut the hinges. The noise was deafening in that confined space. Sparks flew everywhere. The smell of burning metal was acrid. They were running a huge risk, but the allure of the safe was too strong to ignore. They just kept thinking, what was worth protecting this heavily? It took nearly an hour, but they got the first hinge. The second was easier. The safe door was finally loose. They used a heavy-duty car jack to pry it open. The final moment arrived. They shone the light inside. It wasn't money. It wasn't gold. It was something entirely unexpected. Something that made them both completely silent. It wasn't currency. It wasn't jewels. It was stamps. Thousands of them. All individually sealed, carefully catalogued, and dated. And they were old. They pulled one out. It was a 1918 inverted jenny, a misprinted American stamp, famous in philatelic history. They immediately knew they weren't looking at paper anymore. They were looking at one of the world's most valuable collections of errors and rarities, protected in a climate-controlled vault for 80 years. And this, the small pendant on top. It was a platinum and sapphire pin. The journal mentioned it as a final seal. It was worth thousands on its own, but the stamps. They spent the next week quietly cataloging just the first tray. They contacted a specialist dealer in rare stamps, keeping the whole story under wraps. The specialist nearly passed out when they showed him the photos. He authenticated nearly a dozen of the world's rarest stamps, including the penny black, the Z grill, and a full sheet of uncirculated trecetals. His final valuation? The collection, protected perfectly from light, humidity, and temperature for 8 decades, was worth $4.5 million USD. The fisherman wasn't smuggling gold. He was protecting a national treasure of philately, a collection so rare it was priceless to the right collectors. The hut that cost them everything gave them everything back, and then some. They were fools for buying a ruin, but they were lucky that the fisherman was a patriot and an obsessive collector. They've sold the rarest stamps to fund a full restoration of the hut and the entire coastline property. They're keeping the old journals and the safe as a monument to Elias Thorne. They went from scraping by to being financially free, all because they dared to look beneath the surface of a simple wooden box. Thanks for watching our incredible journey.